Welcome into the latest edition of our Cubs Recap Podcast, a presentation of the Recap YouTube channel and available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. In Arizona, living the good life. That's Gordon Wittenmyer. Behind him, the Royal Stadium in Surprise, Arizona. And I'm David Kaplan, working hard, grinding as always, right here in the Recap Studios in suburban Chicago. Okay, Gordo. Last week, Tom Ricketts met the media for his State of the Cubs address that he does every year. He takes questions, the whole deal. And there have been times where I knew that team was terrible, and he would say, oh, yeah, I think we can win the division. I'd be like, you liar. You have no way of thinking that team can win.
He said it the first 2 years when they were tanking.
Correct.
When they brought Theo in.
That's what I'm talking about. And he said it again in like 2022. And I'm like, no, you're not. Your team's horrible. But I understood what they were doing. This time, when he said, I expect to win the division. We should win the division. And I want to win more World Series around here. And he talked about championships. I've never heard Danny Wirtz do that. I've never heard George McCaskey do that. I've never heard Jerry Reinsdorf do that. I don't hear the other owners in town talk in terms of championships. We want to play big games in September. We want to finish in second, but really battle and maybe get to the postseason. I've heard all the nonsense over all the years. Ed Lynch, we just want to play competitive games in September that matter. No, I want to win the freaking World Series. And when I heard our owner of the Cubs say that, I was like, it's about flipping time. What do you think?
I think he says a version of this every year, as you already alluded to. I think until he shows more annually, it's all talk. Now, I think that your emotions are colored by the fact that they actually went out and spent $175 million on a guy this year, that they actually put some resources into a team that made the playoffs after winning 92 games last year. Mm-hmm. And that is a legitimate reason to think that they might win the division this year. And to have that kind of hope that maybe they won one round in the postseason last year. Maybe they win two. Maybe they win three. Depending on if somebody else knocks out the Dodgers, right? So
that's it.
But the point is, he should feel optimistic. You should feel optimistic this season. But the talk is just talk until we see more of this annually. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. The same day he said that stuff about wanting to win a World Series and more World Series and all that, he was asked about payroll flexibility. He says, we always have, like at the deadline, we always have flexibility at the deadline. We'll see. They crapped the bed at the deadline last year. Probably cost them at least one round of the playoffs. And we'll see if that happens again this year. So he's still, in my mind, if I'm you, Cap, if I'm a big-time Cubs fan, he's still got a lot to prove to me.
Oh, there's no question, but let me ask you something. When we had Jed in here, Jed said, I had flexibility dollar-wise at the deadline last year. He wouldn't get into specific names, but I reported what the names were, that to get Joe Ryan or Mackenzie Gore was going to cost you Matt Shaw, Jackson Wiggins, and something else. And
well, I mean, that's just stupid. Those are non-starters.
And that's why those guys didn't get traded at the deadline.
But here's the thing about that, Cap. I trust your reporting. All that I'm sure is true. I'm sure there are many other names out there, many other talks, teams that were suggesting other trades that would have required some of those names. That happens all the time. The thing you got to compare it to is what players did get moved that helped other teams at what cost, because those are the players that could have been had at those costs. So where were the Cubs on those deals? They weren't anywhere on some of those deals that could have helped them. And those are the things that you look at in retrospect. When you know what the market was and the price was because it's already played out, and your team is the one that sat out a lot of those deals. So whether that was who was that guy from Washington that got injured his first
Mike
inning?
Soroka.
Soroka. Like if you could have got a Zach Littell instead of a Soroka. Zach Littell performed. Soroka didn't. And by the way, Soroka wasn't having a good year anyway, even before he got hurt. So, those are the margins that you compare. And they didn't get a better guy than Mike Soroka. Was toward the bottom of the available pitchers out there, starting pitchers. So we'll see what happens. Like I hear what you're saying. Basically, what Jed did was, and we asked him about Littell, for instance, versus Soroka. He said they misevaluated. So we'll see what happens this trade deadline. Right now, this team looks really good. Right now, you have a right to feel optimistic, and Tom Ricketts has a right to feel optimistic. I agree with that.
In terms of the deadline, you and I have covered a lot of deadlines. I've been on this particular beat since 1993. That's a long time. That's 33 years coming up here on this season. You've been doing it just about as long as I have, and you've had the Twins and the Mariners and the Cubs and the Reds.
Yeah, even before the Cubs. I mean, you were covering Cy Young and then I think Hack Wilson was your first Cubs team.
Actually, the first podcast I ever did was with Christy Mathewson. So my question to you is, do you believe when GMs, team presidents, owners, chairmen of the board, whatever it is, when they say it's not about the money, we got the money at the deadline. We're not talking about Shohei Ohtani's contract or Juan Soto or whoever. It's about the prospects that people try to fleece you for at the deadline, and we just weren't going to do that because from what I'm hearing from people out there, and I'm not talking about people with the Cubs, I'm talking about people just in the game who have seen him, they said this Jackson Wiggins kid is ridiculous. If the Cubs had traded him, that would have been the dumbest thing they could have ever done. So my question to you is, in all your years, do you believe when teams tell you it's not about the money, it's about what I have to give up?
Well, it's like anything else. It depends on the team and it depends on the context. Most of the time, I think that's true. Most of the time at the deadline, it's about the player capital, especially when you're talking about a team like the Cubs. I believe the Cubs when they say it wasn't about the money because I have no reason not to believe that. They whiffed on the moves they made. And teams were asking a lot for some of the players we saw out there that really, honestly, that didn't get moved. And so, obviously, when the high-end players don't get moved in a trade market, that's all about the player capital. That's not about the money involved. So I do believe that. I'll tell you one thing. I want to go back to one more point on Ricketts talking about wanting to win more World Series and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He had, I mean, look, this is 10 years now since they won one, and they've already they tore that team down after a few years, and you can call it whatever, pandemic, finances, whatever you want to attribute it to. You can say maybe they made the right moves on some of those players by not bringing them back. You can talk about all that history that you want to. The fact is they rebuilt again. They tanked to rebuild again since then. They're a big market team that shouldn't have to do that. If you want a blueprint for what we're talking about, look at the Dodger blueprint. And so you don't have to do that. And at the GM meetings, I talked to more than half of the team's representatives who were there, executives, about who the next World Series winner out of the NL Central will be. And the Cubs beat out the Brewers with the most votes. It was fairly close. It was not real close. Nobody was close. I think the Reds got one vote, but the Brewers and the Cubs got all the rest of the votes. The Cubs got the most votes, and it was all because of the money. One executive said, and this wasn't an executive from the division either. He said they have the resources to dwarf that division. The fact that they don't do that is why you should sit up and take notice, and why you should always look sideways at whatever comes out of the mouths of the people on the ownership and the business side.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. What does dwarfing the rest of the division mean? Because I'm pulling up the 2026 tax tracker on Spot Track, and the tax tracker right now has the Chicago Cubs at 9th at $240.8 million right now, today. That's their tax payroll. And the next closest in their division is Cincinnati, $100 million behind them. Milwaukee, 111 behind them. Pittsburgh, 120 behind them. The Cardinals, 121 behind them. So what does that mean in your world that they dwarf the rest of the division?
So what it means is that you're a top 3 revenue team in baseball. You don't spend as a top 3 payroll spending team. So by that definition, you're underspending your resources. And in a division that has 3 legitimate small market teams and another kind of unique team. So you got your Pittsburgh, your Cincinnati, and Milwaukee. Milwaukee's literally the smallest market in baseball. And then you've got St. Louis, which is considered a small market, but they've got revenue streams that some of the other small market teams don't have. So you can put them in maybe in the middle of the pack. But you've got such an advantage. If you look at the coast divisions, they've got multiple teams that are high revenue teams. So you're competing, like if you're San Diego, which spends a lot of money, you're competing with the Dodgers. If you're out east and you're the Mets and the Phillies, they both spend a lot. The Yankees and the Blue Jays, the Red Sox are kind of the Cubs. They use that luxury tax threshold as a guideline, and they try to stay under it and reset here and there, but they won't go in with all their resources. In their case, you could make the case that they have to stay more nimble because they have the Yankees and the Blue Jays to contend with. In the Cubs case, they could just economically throttle that division in a way that even nobody in the AL Central can. That's what it means, Cap. It means not tanking to rebuild a second time after winning that World Series, because you don't have to in this division. That's what it means. It means using your resources, the resource advantage, as a competitive advantage to the level you have that resource advantage. Instead, what they're using it for, to buy up land around the ballpark, make more profits, build more revenue streams. That's all fine. They're a private business. They can do whatever they want. But if I'm a fan, I can take that into account when I say how much I believe my owner's all in, or how much I'm willing to spend on a ticket to watch a team when they're in between their attempts to win a World Series.
In terms of this team, the way it was constructed, I thought Jed was very intelligent going out and throwing, rather than going, okay, what reliever can I get as a closer and pay him 4 for 80 or whatever the number is? Is there a group of guys like we did with Brad Keller a year ago, and he took a minor league deal, ended up closing for you, and now got a $30 million deal with the Philadelphia Phillies? I like that they took a chance. Their doctor signed off on Hunter Harvey, who's had injury issues, but when he's right, that dude's legit. And they signed this guy and that, Phil Maton and Hobie Milner, and they just kept throwing resource after resource. And then when Jed was in here with you and I, he said, look, there's going to be injuries. There'll be things. We never saw Schwarber coming to blow his knee out in 16, 3 games into the season. But he said, we have at least 9 guys that we think could start a baseball game for us if we had a pitcher on the injured list. For me, that's the biggest key of them all.
Yeah, I agree. And Jed was the one years and years ago when it looked like, when it looked like the Cubs had pitching depth. They had 5 guys, maybe 6, maybe 6.5 that you thought, well, geez, all these guys deserve a rotation spot. He was the guy that said, hey, man, over the course of the season, you need 8. You probably need 9. starters. And so, yeah, it's good that they're stacking these guys. I mean, that's why the Edward Cabrera move was so impressive in the offseason. So, and now you've got, I mean, look, we just saw, and this isn't even pitching, right? I think that they took a base of the bull. They built a pretty good bullpen last year, like the old sort of. I won't say they exceeded expectations, but some of the guys that had success in many cases, you maybe didn't see it coming, and so they took that and they bolstered that in a big way with a number of guys. They're building depth, and we saw just this week, just over the weekend, another depth guy come in who could, by the end of things, could really play a role for this team, depending on how things fall. And that's Michael Conforto. That's a significant depth piece. So they had a 92-win team last year. Most of the core is back, at least for another year, maybe two in some cases. And so this is, and you got the CBA thing coming up. We're going to have a lockout on December 1st. Everybody knows that. It's just a matter of how long it's going to be. We don't know if we're going to lose games next year. This is the time to seize that moment, and they're doing it. So give them credit for that. And we'll see what happens after that. I mean, the big test is going to be, what are the new rules after the CBA, and where do these guys go from there?
So let me ask you this. As you look at Nico Hoerner, final year of a deal, makes, I believe, $11 million this year. Final year of his contract. Let me just make sure. I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on Nico Hoerner. Yeah, he had a 3-year, $35 million deal, and this year's salary is $12. So he makes $12 million this year. Average annual value was 11.666. How much would you give Nico Hoerner if he came to you and said, hey, bro, I'm interested in getting this done right now before the season starts? How much would you be interested, and how much would you pay him if you were making the move? Because I have a number in my head.
Yeah, assuming that this season plays out more or less like we expect as a successful playoff season, and maybe they go deep in October. I want him back. Whatever happens with some of these contracts and what happens with the CBA rules moving forward, I want Nico Hoerner in the middle of my clubhouse next year if I'm the Cubs. I want to make sure he's there for a number of years, because as I transition into whatever this next core is, some of these guys stay in, some of these guys going, new guys coming in, Cade Horton coming up, Jackson Wiggins coming. I want Hoerner to be my tone setter. Now, they had a guy who was a completely different type of a clubhouse leader. It's a completely different type of a tone setter in Anthony Rizzo, who they didn't keep. And there were all kinds of things going on at the time. There were financial things going on at the time. And you could argue whether that was a good thing or a bad thing that they didn't keep him. But Hoerner is a guy who absolutely sets the right tone as a role model for young players, as the way he plays, as a smart guy who can talk to other players and help their games. And I keep going back to this, Cap. I don't care if he never hits more than 10 home runs in a season. What he does in every other part of his game is a rare combination skill set that is valuable on the field as much as I value who he is off the field. So I would give him a long-term deal. And I would give him, I mean, depending on where you started, if he's making 12 this year, maybe he makes 15 in the first year, 17, whatever. And maybe the average is a 20 million average over the course of 5 years or so. So if you're talking 5 and 100, I would give him that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Here are the salaries for second baseman right now. Now, keep in mind the most expensive second baseman, Xander Bogaerts, is 30 years of age. He signed an 11-year deal. Average annual value is $25.454.
But he signed as a shortstop.
That's correct. Shortstop, third base is what he signed as. And they ended up, because they had Tatis, he was going to play third. They ended up moving him with Machado there over to second. So he's number one. $25 million for both Jose Altuve and Marcus Simeon. Gleyber Torres is at $22 million. That shocks me. He's a good player. He's not great. Jorge
I'd rather have
Polanco
Nico, obviously.
is $20 million. Ketel Marte, 19.4. Andres Jimenez, 15.2. And Jeff McNeil, 12.5. So for me, Nico Hoerner is a freaking steal at 11.6. I would absolutely have no problem saying, okay, I'm going to go a little bit more out of my comfort zone. I'm going to give you 5 for 125.
Wow. I like that bold move, Cap. And you're usually financially conservative on these things. I like that. I'll co-sign on that.
I'm doing that because
I'll co-sign the loan to Tom Ricketts. So
there you go. I'm doing that because of these reasons. Do I think the Cubs will? I think they're going to try and get him a lot cheaper than that, like 5 for 90, something like that. I'm doing it because not only is he a really good player, defensively, offensively, base runner, he's one of my cornerstone leaders in my room.
Right? That's what I'm saying. I couldn't agree with you more. And he's a homegrown guy. He came up in the organization. He knows from day one what it is. Remember, he came up as an emergency guy from AA. What was that, back in 19, when they just ran out of shortstops because everybody kept getting hurt.
He was on his mom and dad's couch.
Exactly. I mean, he's been through, and then he opened the year in the minors the year before, and so or the next year, and so he's seen it all. He knows what it is to play in Chicago. He knows what the challenges are. He knows what it is to be a Cub. He is the culture of that team right now. Like, and you could say, well, maybe he wasn't when he came up. Like, maybe that was a different culture there, and he wasn't. But who he is who that team is right now, and he's the culture you want in that room to build around. So I'm with you. I think you keep him, and if that qualifies as an overpay, he's the guy you overpay.
Yeah, because he does so much for me. Gold Glove defender, base runner, stolen base threat. From what I've watched, he has a lot more muscle on his frame. Maybe he gets me 15 home runs. Not expecting him to hit me 30. And great in the clutch, great driving runs in, and he is a wonderful human. You add it all up, that's it.
I couldn't agree more. We don't often agree to this level, Cap, but that's one that I don't think we have an iota of disagreement on this one.
All right. Now you've got Bregman locked up. You've got Dansby locked up. Matt Shaw, I'm hearing Jesse said today he believes that Matt Shaw is going to play a lot more in right field than anybody realizes. Do you agree with that?
I could see it, given that you got a DH out there now. Sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. And by the way, Matt Shaw, what he did at third base, moving over to that position, was pretty exceptional. I mean, he showed an athleticism, a defensive athleticism that I think makes him a strong candidate out there. And they talked about that. The council talked about that at the winter meetings. This guy could move around. And Jed talked about that when we had him in the studio. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think he's got the ability to do well and play a lot of positions. And when you got PCA in center field, you can afford the luxury of breaking in a guy at one of the corners, and
you can,
and letting him get his legs under him.
Would you re-sign Ian Happ? He's a free agent at the end of the year.
Ian Happ's another interesting case.
He's another fabric guy in your clubhouse.
He is, and there's a lot of things to like about him. I don't know that I would do the same level of overpay for him that I would consider for Hoerner. But if he wanted to work with me on a contract, if I'm Jed, and we can come to terms on something that we both think is equitable, maybe a 3 or 4 year deal, a 3 and an option, I would consider him a plus coming back. Yeah, but not at an overpay, like we've discussed with Hoerner.
In terms of this team, I'll let you go on this. I truly believe they can. I'm not saying they will. They can, with good health and with an aggressive mindset at the deadline, they can win the World Series. I'm not telling you they will. In your opinion, do you co-sign with what I'm saying?
Look, that team last year finished 5 wins short of getting to the World Series, right?
Yep.
The Dodgers are the team, right? This team, with good health, matches up against anybody else. And then it's about how you position yourself in the postseason. Remember, the Dodgers didn't have the best record in baseball last year.
They did not.
The Brewers,
did.
So that meant they didn't have home field advantage game 1 and 2 in the NLCS. So if you could have a big regular season, put yourself in a position, win that division, maybe jockey for position to have the 1 seed, but steal a game against the Dodgers. You got enough talent to maybe do something like that. It's possible, because if they get through the National League, they can match up with anybody. Whoever wins the National League is probably the World Series favorite, right?
No question. No question. And I really think if Jackson Wiggins is who they think he is, and you go Horton and Edward Cabrera and Matt Boyd and Jackson Wiggins by that point, and then you've got Tyon and Imanaga, like –
Okay. Slow your roll, Cap. Slow your roll, because Jackson Wiggins is going to be on a workload issue, a workload plan.
Kate Horton wasn't.
Yes, he was. Look at his innings per start.
Well, okay, that kind, but he could still be. They said, had he not gotten injured in the bullpen getting ready for the playoffs, he had no restriction in the playoff.
Here's your best hope, that Cade Horton gets managed well enough that he's healthy and fresh down the stretch, and that he's still giving you quality innings, because this is going to be, he's growing into what's probably going to be his highest workload season again this year. And so if he backs up what he did and he pitches more innings, so that's a best case scenario for your staff there, that Justin Steele comes back, and by starting in, say, first part of June, maybe he's still fresh down the stretch. We don't know. He's coming off the Tommy John, but that's a best case scenario. And then Wiggins maybe becomes like this secret weapon for you, the way David Price was in what year was it, 2008 or 9?
Yeah, he was the closer first for the Rays and then became a starter.
Like, if Wiggins can be managed and have a lot of bullets left in that arm down the stretch, he could be a difference maker for you when you get into the postseason and the bullpens matter so much. That's your best scenario, Cap.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm just excited that baseball's back, man. We're sitting on the couch yesterday, my son and I, and we're watching the Giants feed of the Cubs and the Giants with John Miller on the call. Why Marquis didn't do it, I don't know.
Triple play.
Oh, my God. That was awful. Clean that stuff up. Gordo, have a great day, man.
All right, you too, Cap. Good luck with all that World Series talk, pal.
Hey, my chairman of the board said, I want to win more World Series. I'm taking him at his word.
Yeah, good luck.
Have a great day. There he is, the great Gordon Wittenmyer in Arizona covering spring training. I'm David Kaplan. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the Cubs Recap Podcast, a presentation of our Recap YouTube channel and available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcast. For Gordon, I'm Cap. Take that.